Hello and welcome to Wrestling Unwrapped number 23 as Harry Broadhurst and Patrick Ketza take you through Halloween Havoc 1998 in just about 25 seconds.
Thank you very much, Sean. And as always, welcome in to Wrestling Unwrapped. Kind of a little late, we know, but our Halloween edition of Wrestling Unwrapped, where tonight we will be covering legitimately one of the longest WCW pay-per-views of all time. And, well, we'll talk about it later, but that creates a few problems. As always, I'm your host, Patrick Ketza, and joining me, Mr. Harry Broadhurst. How are you, Harry?
What up, though? I'm all right. You know, I gotta be honest, it's gonna be a little hard to concentrate on tonight's show. We've got a hell of a Sunday night game on in the background. But I'll do my best. I'm a professional most of the time, so I will do my best to make sure I keep this as professional as possible. And I already have the results ready to go, so, you know, I'm on top of that one for this show at least.
So we're going to cover the longest WCW pay-per-view while trying to do it in as short amount of time as humanly possible. That's pretty much what you're saying.
Oh, no, we'll give the show its proper due because there were actually several really good matches on this show, including, in my opinion, one of the underrated WCW classics from two of my favorite performers. And I'm actually not talking about the main event when I say that. We'll get to that a little bit later.
As I sit here waiting for a plane to go by.
Maybe you should tell us who the show is presented by.
Yeah, maybe I should. As always, the show is, well, for starters, the show is a presentation of the W2M Network. For more information about the W2M Network, check out W2Mnet.com. You can find all sorts of great stuff on there, all of our podcasts, all the W2M podcasts, a lot of different articles and information about not just wrestling, but football, including their own top 25 rankings for the college football season, all kinds of great stuff about video games, and I believe some other pop culture stuff, too. And Harry, of course, helps out with the top 25 rankings. I usually help out when they do the pay-per-view roundtable previews, and just a lot of great information there. And then, as always, this is brought in partnership with 411mania.com. And, do you want to take this, Harry, or do you want me to?
Yeah, well, I might as well. I usually do this part. In addition, I'm going to talk to Sean about possibly doing some television reviews as well. So there's a couple ideas that I have for television shows. Like they do that over at 411 Mania. They review a couple of TV shows in their entertainment section. So maybe we could do the same here for W2M Net. Do like a television review setup. But me and Sean will have to discuss that. It's kind of a rough idea at this present moment. Tonight's episode of Wrestling Unwrapped is brought to you by the Madhouse Toy Chest. Stores.ebay.com/Madhouse Toy Chest. If you are a fan of anything wrestling, DVDs, action figures, magazines, VHS tapes. Yeah, he even has VHS tapes. For a while, he had wrestling blankets, ladies and gentlemen.
The problem with that is there's no such thing as a VCR anymore. Nobody makes them anymore.
Yeah, well, I mean, technically some of them still work, and there are places that fix old ones, so it's viable, I suppose. Anyways.
As long as it's not beta.
You're killing me, dude. Now I know how you feel when I interrupt you at the end of the show.
Sorry.
The sponsor's going to get mad at you. If you're a fan of anything wrestling related, like I said, action figures, DVDs, VHS tapes, magazines, pretty much anything wrestling related you could think of. You can go on to stores.ebay.com/Madhouse Toy Chest and take a look. Jason's prices are really good, not to mention he's a sponsor of the show too. So, and he's a good dude to deal with. Mention you hear the advertisement here on our show, and he'll throw in a free gift with your purchase.
Sorry.
It's okay. I now sympathize with what I put you guys through sometimes.
I know. Sorry.
You know what we should do?
What?
We should get like a little soundbite that we can just press a button, have Sean press a button for us, and then it plays the advertisements and our introductions and stuff. Can we work on that?
That would be a bad idea. He's off doing his own thing.
Yeah, we can do that. You guys have to pre-record it, and then I just press play, and it does all
right.
that.
All right. I respect you, producer man.
God. That's a wrong pay-per-view.
That's a different WCW show.
Well, thank you for the respect.
Patrick immediately got the reference.
Yeah.
I just watched a review of that show.
It's going to be one of those broadcasts, I can tell.
Oh, yeah. So, yes, tonight is WCW Halloween Havoc 1998. For the third consecutive year, and the third of 5 consecutive years, the MGM Grand Garden Arena at the world-famous MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada. Turns out I didn't even realize it actually became a tradition, and the last 5 consecutive Halloween Havocs would all take place at the same arena.
Yeah, well, that's because the last 2 were papered to hell and back, so, you know.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. So, as we always do... What?
Towards the end of WCW, they couldn't sell enough tickets. They had to give away most of their tickets. Frankly, Vince probably paid more than he should have, but that's neither here nor there.
The thing was, in the mid-90s, they would have a sellout crowd of, like, let's say 6,000, with 1,500 being papered in. So it wasn't much better. It was really just a 2-year span. We're actually in the middle of that 2-year span.
Which is sad, because this is actually a tolerable show by and large. But we'll break this show down in its entirety coming up next year. Ready to start when you are.
And that's where we were heading towards. So, as we always do, we kick things off with the results of the pay-per-view. Here's Harry.
As Patrick mentioned, it is WCW Halloween Havoc 1998. If you give me one quick second, I will pull up my DVD list, and I will get you a specific date. I want to say October 23rd, but I'm not sure.
I was thinking 28th.
It's in the middle, 25th.
There we go.
As Patrick mentioned, we are from the MGM Las Vegas Resort Casino, and this is your 10th of 12. Remember when there only used to be 12 pay-per-views in a year? I miss those times. Anyway, for Halloween Havoc 1998, these are your results. Chris Jericho retains the television title via, I guess, technically pass out, so TKO. Defeating Raven with the Lion Tamer at 7 minutes and 48 seconds to retain the TV title.
He did tap.
I thought they sold it that Raven passed out.
No, because they made a lot of light of the fact that he tapped out. Because they said it was the second time he had tapped out.
Oh, this was during his Raven doesn't care era anyway, so okay, that makes sense.
No.
All right, moving on. Raph pins Ming, b.k.a. Haku, with some meltdown at 4:21. The Disco Inferno pins Juventud Guerrero with a jumping pile driver at 9 minutes and 39 seconds to earn a cruiserweight title match against Billy Kidman a little bit later on in the show. In a match from the Thunder tapings that somehow got slotted on pay-per-view, Alex Wright defeats Finlay with a hangman's neck breaker at 5 minutes and 15 seconds. Does the network have the 3 bonus matches, or are those 3 cut out for the network version?
No, I had 12 matches. I had all of them.
Okay, so the network version does have the 3 extra matches intact too. Okay, because on some versions, like on the VHS tape version of the show, and yes, VHS tapes were a thing, kids. I actually used to own the 2 shows that bookended this on VHS, Fall Brawl and World War III, but that's neither here nor there. On the VHS tape version of this show, that Raft match, the Alex Wright Finley match, and the next match, Perry Saturn pinning Lodi with a Death Valley driver at 3:49, are all deleted from the DVD or from the VHS tape.
My guess is it was because it was taking up too much space. Even on the network, this one goes 3:15.
Yeah, my guess is that with those matches cut, they actually fit the entire pay-per-view on the VHS tape. All right, because most VHS tapes have like a maximum run time, especially in the quality that you want a pay-per-view to be on VHS. So remember, there was a time where VHS tapes were selling for like $20 each. All right, anyways, WCW Cruiserweight Champion Billy Kidman retains the Cruiserweight title, pinning the Disco Inferno at 10:48 with a shooting star press. Buff Bagwell and Rick Steiner win the tag team titles because that's why, defeating the Giant and Scott Steiner when Rick pins the Giant at 8:25, which immediately leads into Rick Steiner pinning Scott Steiner with a flying bulldog in a singles match at 5 minutes and 4 seconds.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot to talk about. We're going to have a lot to talk about with that one.
Scott Hall defeats Kevin Nash by countout in 14 minutes and 15 seconds. Bret Hart defeats Sting via stretcher job, and technically sharpshooter, at 15 minutes and 4 seconds. I almost so inclined to let you take this one. I really do. I do. The time is 14:18. By all means, go ahead.
In the first half of the double main event, Hollywood Hulk Hogan defeats the Warrior.
Yes, no ultimate.
Yeah, I know. Via SU. Now I'm actually trying to remember the exact way that they did it since they screwed up over
well, the Fireball said no way, Jose, and then Horace Hogan hit Warrior with a chair.
And I think via leg drop for the 3 count at, what was it, 14-18?
Because someone wanted his win back.
8 years later.
I was waiting. I teed you up perfectly for that, brother. I was waiting for it. And your other half of the double main event, the last time WCW would win the ratings war the very next night on Nitro is because Goldberg pins Diamond Dallas Page at 10 minutes and 29 seconds with a jackhammer.
Great match. Too bad nobody sees it. We'll talk more about that later.
Well, some pay-per-view companies didn't cut the feed. Most of them did, though, which puts WCW into the snafu that they found themselves in. And if you know your WCW, you know that the phrase snafu could not be any more appropriate. Situation normal. Yeah, you can fill in the rest on your own.
Yeah, and when we get to that match, I'm going to bring up something I noticed when I was watching this, because yes, I did watch the network version of this. I'm going to bring up something that I noticed there in terms of the time. So, but we'll get to that later. So we have to get through the first 11 matches first.
I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Those 3 bonus, and I use air quotes here even though you can't see them, matches, I have like nothing to say about. So technically I'm going to discuss 9 matches.
There's probably one match that at least bears mentioning.
Is it Alex Wright and Fit Finlay?
Hell no.
Oh, I like Fit Finlay.
I do too, but hell no. Anyway, kicking things off first.
You've heard of the results. But we can't do this. We have to officially start the show. You've heard the results, Now here's the breakdown. This is WCW Halloween Havoc 1998 on episode 23 of Wrestling Unwrapped.
Indeed, and thank you very much for the results, Harry. So yes, kicking things off is U.S. TV. I honestly couldn't remember for a second. The TV championship is on the line as the champion, the Lionheart baby, Chris Jericho, takes on Who Cares Raven, or I Don't Care Raven.
He cared during the course of the match itself, though.
This is true, and wait a minute. Is this the match that you were talking about?
Yes, actually, this is my favorite match.
Okay.
Spoiler alert, this is actually my favorite match on this show. Because
for sure.
given their relative positions on the card at this time, and this has nothing to do with the fact that Jericho is my favorite wrestler, and I've made no bones about that on this podcast. But given their relative positions on the time here and the fact that they were sent out first to get this crowd warmed up for what they were hoping was going to be a relatively solid show, and by and large, I mean, you can see what they were trying to do with most of the card, but in my opinion, there's no match on the rest of the show that gets any better than this one. The main event comes close, but it doesn't quite reach this level.
I mean, this might be one of the best openers that we've covered so far in the 23 episodes now that we've done of this show. This was actually a really, really good match. I found it weird, though, like towards the end, that all of a sudden here's Canyon. But that aside,
I can actually fill in the blanks here. Canyon had a loose affiliation with Raven's Flock. The Flock was broken up the previous month at Fall Brawl by Saturn when Saturn defeated Raven in a Raven's Rules match. I mean, technically every Raven match in WCW was a Raven's Rules match, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that Saturn broke up the Flock by defeating Raven at Fall Brawl, Canyon and Raven still maintained something of a professional relationship. Canyon's attempt to get involved here was actually to assist Raven, and it ended up costing Raven the match, as Jericho sent Raven into Canyon, and then that's what led to the Lion Tamer for the finish.
All right, fair enough. Getting to there, though, yeah, this was, and it seemed a little faster than I'm used to with Raven, but at the same time, it seemed more of Jericho's speed. And yeah, this ended up being almost a little bit of a finisher fest, too, to start the show off, because if I recall correctly, Raven gets out of, well, technically Raven gets out of the walls of Jericho. Jericho didn't use the Lion Tamer at first. And then also, I believe Chris Jericho does kick out of an even flow DDT, which absolutely gets the crowd into it. And unfortunately, after this match, that momentum with the crowd kind of just dies.
Well, I'm inclined to disagree with you because I actually think that the crowd was kind of into the two cruiserweight matches. You can't really judge the bonus matches, though, because I know for a fact at least one of those matches was pre-recorded, and I actually think two of them were. But neither here nor there for that. As far as the match itself goes, yeah, it's only the second time in WCW somebody had kicked out of the even flow. The previous person to do so was actually Saturn the month before at Fall Brawl.
That makes total sense then, and I believe this would also be only the second time that Raven had tapped out, but for the life of me, and they mentioned it on commentary too, but for the life of me, I cannot remember who was the first to get Raven to tap out.
I would say with almost certainty it was probably Benoit.
That would make the most sense, but I'm not 100% certain that it's him. Because at this point, Raven was kind of getting up there, because I think he had the U.S. title match with Goldberg, so he was maybe not at the main event level, but he was at least in the upper level enough to be kind of sniffing the main event scene as Goldberg was on his rise. Yeah, obviously, Goldberg completely canned him in a Ravens Wolf match, I believe, because that one was a complete cluster and had like 5 interferences. But, you can kind of see at this point that, sorry, real quick, let me just finish. You can kind of see at this point that Raymond was on his way down.
Yeah, that I'll agree with. And eventually Raven would end up shunted into the tag team division, teaming with Saturn, ironically enough, as 1999 would come upon us, leading to, in my opinion, one of the best WCW tag team title matches of all time with Raven and Saturn against Benoit and Malenko from Spring Stampede 1999, which is a show I really think we should cover at some point because it is one of my favorite WCW pay-per-views and is actually, in my opinion, the most underrated WCW pay-per-view.
Well, it's 99 and not 2000.
Oh, no, we're going to do Spring Stampede 2000 at some point, too, and you're just going to have to accept that. But as far as done pissed off Patrick already. All right, moving on. As far as this particular thing goes, yeah, you're right. He's on his way back down because the Goldberg match that you mentioned was on the night after Spring Stampede 1998. A little bit of symbolism there, which would have been back in April of 1998. So Raven had the whole flock thing going throughout the summer there. He had kind of the feud with Saturn going on, which, as I mentioned, paid off at Fall Brawl 1998. He also had kind of a somewhat feud against Billy Kidman, as Kidman was breaking away from the flock as well. But all of this would end up leading to Raven being moved into the tag team division in WCW.
Which makes sense in the grand scheme of things, and obviously he would never really regain the momentum. But yes, in the end, Chris Jericho ends up winning via the tap out and celebrates like an idiot.
Well, overly celebratory Jericho was kind of his thing around there. Let's not forget, he beat Fake Goldberg the month before at Fall Brawl, so,
Oh, fair enough. So, moving on.
Just real quick, have you ever seen that bit from Fall Brawl 98? If you've not, I'll have to send you a link.
I don't think I have.
All right, I'll send you a link sometime I'll look on either on YouTube or Daily Motion and see if I can't find it for you.
Okay. So, moving on. Well, actually, okay, real quick.
Do we have to?
No. I'm going to make a quick mention about what happens before this match. And it's going to kind of have to do with something that we're going to have to talk about later.
I know where you're going with this. By all means, set the table.
All right. Real quick. Probably the most famous thing to occur from this pay-per-view is the fact that it gets cut off. We'll talk more in detail about that later. This match does not start until 10 minutes into the show. Legitimately. This pay-per-view starts with a ton of filler, including the Nitro Girls, and a promo that does kind of set up the tag team match, but took way too damn long. I think it took them it was 5 full minutes, setting up Buff Bagwell and Rick Steiner teaming up.
Yeah, well, Mean Gene needed his money, so.
But was the hotline even a thing at this point?
Yes, actually, it was.
Oh, okay. Because it seemed like they're pushing the website more by now. But be that as it may, it starts with a ton of filler, and then we continue with a ton of filler.
Brother.
As we move into our next match, and trust me, we're going to floor it through some of these. Our next match, Wrath versus Meng.
BKA Haku.
BKA Haku, and that's about all that's actually worth mentioning.
Yeah, well, this was actually during the time that they were starting to give Wrath a singles push once he made his re-debut into WCW, because at Fall Brawl the month before, or not Fall Brawl, excuse me, at World War III the month after, my mistake, he would take on Glacier as well. And Wrath would have himself like a 4 or 5 month undefeated streak, which would be ended by Big Poochie on his road to challenging Goldberg at Starrcade 1998. And then, much the same way that Raven found himself, Raph would end up back in the tag team division as well as one half of Chronic, known as Brian Clark.
And that's probably all that's actually worth mentioning about this, is the fact that Raph wins.
Yeah, pretty much. We mentioned the fact that we mentioned the fact that that Raph wins with the meltdown, which is pretty standard pump handle slam, but at the time was still considered relatively innovative. And it was an impressive power move, so, I mean, good for him, but like we said before on this show, Raph it didn't really lead to anything due to the fact that all the momentum that Raph generated during this time frame was simply used to put Big Sexy over on his road to the Goldberg title match at Starrcade, so, there you have it.
And not only that, I mean, yes, it was considered an innovative move, but I thought Test would actually hit better.
Oh, I agree. I thought Test's version of the pump handle slam was way better, and I think the one thing that held Test back is that he never really had a cool name for his pump handle slam.
Yeah, but that's really neither here nor there. So, legitimately moving on, because we got 10 matches left now. Seriously,
9, because we're going to skip right over.
Why?
9.
Sorry.
I was just going to say 9 because we're just going to skip over the match that was taped at Thunder. Yeah, if you really like Alex Wright, I guess you can go onto the network and watch this match. Finlay getting
that's not even the next match.
Oh wait, no, it's the number one contendership to the Cruiserweight match. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Correct. Disco Inferno, legitimately, when I was a kid around this time, one of my favorite wrestlers. Mind you, I was 7. Taking on Carrera.
I'm actually going to talk your statement of crazy. You ready?
Yes.
Glenn Gilberti is one of the most underrated performers in WCW history.
I don't know that I would go that far, but I liked him. Mostly because I always loved the bumbling idiot. And let's face it, he's a bumbling idiot.
His gimmick, I mean, yeah, the gimmick was beyond stupid. The dude was Mike Awesome before Mike Awesome was that 70s guy, but at the same time, there was just something, I don't know, innately likable about the dude at the Disco Inferno that it made him hard to boo. Now, obviously, when he would get into the later days WCW, and we kind of touched on him as Disco with losing the Inferno being part of the Mama Lukes when we covered one of the latter-day WCW shows that we did, he would lose some of his appeal. But this right here, kind of the Dancing Fools thing that he was doing with Alex Wright at the time, this was completely tolerable.
It helps he was it also helps he was a better dancer than Ernest the Cat Miller.
Well, somebody better call his mama and tell him that Brodus Clay stole his butt. No, just real quick about Disco here, because I'm going to mention this match as well here. I actually think this match was pretty good. And Juventude's another one of those guys who I really don't think gets the credit that he deserved in this time frame in WCW. He was one of those names that put the Cruiserweight division on the map back in WCW because it was his high-flying antics. And he would have a really good match against Kidman the following month at World War III, which is on the Highest Flyers DVD that I recommend if you don't have it, you pick up. Because that's something that I think we should cover. That's something I think we should cover here on the show as well, because it's actually a really solid DVD. But yeah, that match from World War III would end up on that Highest Flyers DVD. And I don't think I don't think Juventude ever really got the credit that he deserved for being as big of a pioneer in the Cruiserweight division as he was. Everybody talks about Psychosis. Everybody talks about Rey Mysterio. Everybody talks about Dean Malenko. But towards the building days of the Cruiserweight division, and especially if you go back and watch a lot of those older Nitros where the Cruiserweight division was getting its start, Juventude was one of those guys that was around week in and week out. Now, obviously, later day Juventude in WCW would lose his damn mind and streak around naked in a hotel room in Australia and get himself fired. But when Juventude's head was in the game, he was really good.
Well, it probably also did help that look at the damn gimmick he was given around that time when he did get fired.
Yeah, he was pretty much The Rock with about a ninth of the charisma.
Nice.
And I don't even really like The Rock either. And I know that's a bold statement to make in and of itself here, but my opinion on The Rock has been stated many times in the fact that I think The Rock gets a pass for a lot of things that a lot of other people who come back to wrestling don't get the pass because people have these rose-colored glasses when it comes to this guy. Yeah, he was incredibly charismatic, and he had his fair share of good matches, but standing out on his own, he was never really anything special in the ring, and not to mention, ever since he's come back to the company, he hasn't done anything for the new talent.
Oh, come on. You don't think, damn, who do you face at 32? Yeah,
that's exactly my point. The fact that you don't remember that it was Eric Rowan says all you need to know.
I kept wanting to say Luke Harper, and I knew it wasn't Luke Harper, and I blanked on Eric Rowan's name. Completely blanked on it.
The fact that you don't even remember that it was Eric Rowan that he beat in 8 seconds says all you need to know about what that did for Eric Rowan.
Yeah. But here's the thing. This match was actually pretty good. But I will say this. Sorry. Disco Inferno has no business being in this match.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think, like I said, I think Gilberti was underrated as a performer.
And I'm not going to deny that, but the idea that Disco Inferno Glenn Gilberti was a cruiserweight? No. Glenn Gilberti was not a cruiserweight.
Absolutely was. He was under the 220-pound weight limit of the division.
Okay, but that doesn't mean you're a cruiserweight. When you think cruiserweight, you think high-flying and fast-paced action.
Okay.
Disco Inferno doesn't do high-flying and fast-paced action.
Okay, but you're thinking of the X Division version of it, where it's no weight limits. It's all about the style. In WCW, it was very specifically weight limit based.
But I 100% understand what you're saying. I totally understand what you're saying. But I don't think of him as being a cruiserweight other than he was under the weight limit. But there's a difference here. You can be under the limit and not be a cruiserweight.
Oh, no, I understand what you're saying about him not fitting the style of cruiserweight performance, but at the same time, it wasn't about style is what I'm saying. It was all about the weight limit, and the fact is that Disco was popular with people, therefore he was getting a push. Obviously not Kidman levels popular, but popular enough to receive the push that he got. That's what I'm saying.
Fair enough there. So yes, Disco Inferno does end up picking up the win via jumping pile driver in actually a somewhat decently long match. It would actually, I think, be in the upper half in terms of match length on this entire pay-per-view.
Hold on, I can look that up right now. It is 6, actually. It is right at the halfway marker. Brett Sting, Hogan Warrior, Hall Nash, Kidman Disco, DDP Goldberg, Disco Juventud.
Which, remember that we mentioned Kidman Disco as well, in terms of that. Because you would think at this point now that Disco would be taking, at least an hour-long break in between his matches? No, he barely gets a half-hour break. As a matter of fact, I don't know that it even was a half an hour of a break. Coming up a little later on when he will face Kidman for the Cruiserweight Championship. But let's power through the rest of these matches first.
I think that depends on whether or not they actually tape this pay-per-view in advance, because WCW was known to do that. If they taped this pay-per-view in advance, then he probably had about a 20-minute break. If they didn't tape it in advance and it aired live, then he did have a half an hour. Regardless, it was significantly shorter than it should have been.
Real quick, I have to ask you, and this really isn't the best place to ask about this. What do you mean by the Nitro tapings? Or rather, what do you mean by the Thunder tapings? Did they use the Halloween Havoc set to tape an episode of Thunder?
No. This next match, and obviously this is what you're inquisitive of me about. This next match is Alex Wright and Fit Finlay. And I apologize to Sean in advance for bringing up his name on the air again. I know he doesn't appreciate when I do. But in Scott Keith's review of this show, which is available on 411, by the way, if you search Smart Retro Repost Havoc 1998. You'll see that this match right here, this Alex Wright and Fit Finlay match, was actually taped at Thunder the week before the pay-per-view, so probably the Tuesday night before the pay-per-view, and was not used on the Thunder broadcast. So they used it here on the Halloween Havoc pay-per-view instead.
But they walked out through the Halloween Havoc set.
Then I'm guessing that they had the Havoc set up for Thunder.
Which would make absolutely no sense, because Thunder, if I recall correctly, would not have been at the MGM Grand Garden Arena, which makes me think that part of that is a little bit of crap.
Like I said, it's in the review. You can judge it for yourself. I've heard stories about WCW editing matches into pay-per-views before, so it wouldn't surprise me. Maybe they did their entrances at the MGM, and then they just aired the match that was pre-taped.
Like, that's the problem or that's the thing that I'm just not understanding, because I recall very specifically that Finlay and Alex Wright, or Berlin, if you want to call him that, which if you do, God help you, he walked out through the Halloween Havoc set.
He wasn't Berlin yet, was he?
No. He wouldn't get that, I think, until Russo.
Okay, so that's still another couple of months away.
Oh, we're talking probably close to a year.
What?
No, Halloween Havoc, so no, probably right up about a year. Because I know he wrestled as Berlin at Fall Brawl 99.
Okay.
That'd be 11 months later. So maybe we're talking 8-9 months from now. Which you could almost kind of see during this match, and this will probably be one of the few things that I'll mention, the fact that Alex Wright, compared to, once again, the dancing idiot that we saw, or that fans would be used to seeing, yes, he did his dance, but he had a bit more, I want to say anger, maybe a bit more cockiness to him now. Almost like he was getting frustrated of being that dancing idiot that he had been now for, cripes, 3 years at least, because I know he was doing this as far back as 95.
Yeah, he was on one of the first 2 episodes of Nitro against Sabu as Alex Wright.
Yeah, and that would have been September of 95. So he had pretty much been almost the exact same character for 3 years. Imagine how we feel in the modern day with John Cena, who's been the same character for 12 years. Anyway, but he had a bit more anger to him, I guess you could say. And I feel like this would kind of start to be a little bit of the catalyst that would lead into him changing his character up. And then eventually teaming with Disco as the Boogie Nights.
All right, so I have a clarification upon checking the IWD. Are you familiar with ProFightDB.com?
Not very.
It's basically another variation of CageMatch.net.
Okay. So it's a database.
ProFightDB is known as IWD, the Internet Wrestling Database. It actually does list Alex and Fit Finlay as a separate match. Apparently, they did face off on the Thunder tapings that week as well, but Fit Finlay won that match. So this is apparently a different match, and I sit corrected, and I apologize.
Yeah, I found it to be, not that I was going to fully deny it, I found it weird that they would do that, although it is WCW who would do that. But it's just felt weird. Alrighty, and our next match is our final of our essentially 3 filler matches. Perry Saturn versus Lodi, and Saturn absolutely steamrolls Lodi.
Yeah, it got a wee bit squishy in here.
And the thing was, this wasn't even that short of a squash match. I picture a squash match to be more 90 seconds to 2 minutes. This one was almost 4, I believe 3:50. And it does, I believe, still sit as one of, if not the shortest, from the looks of it, it is the shortest match on the pay-per-view. But even still, this one got more time than it needed.
I think this was kind of done as a favor to Saturn. Just an opportunity to get him out there onto the show so that way people could see him. I mean, let's not forget that and I know you haven't gotten around to watching it yet, and you probably won't, because frankly the show is by and large crap. But as I've said before, I hold kind of a sentimental place for Fall Brawl in 1998, because it is the very first wrestling VHS tape I ever owned. And in my opinion, the best match on that VHS tape was Raven and Saturn, and I think that they had one hell of a brawl inside of Raven's Rules, where Saturn picked up the win that disbanded the flock permanently. I think this was WCW's way of putting Saturn back on the screen in order to get him pay-per-view time in front of a live audience rather than just having him come out in a dark match or whatever, even though this is 4 minutes that really probably didn't need to be on the pay-per-view, and given the issues we run into later on in the broadcast, you can understand why more specifically. We'll talk about those once we get there.
I'll put it this way. At this point, right here and now, it's Saturn and Lodi. This is on playing by. We are roughly, I'll say about an hour 15 in.
That sounds about right. It's the next.
Yeah.
I have a pay-per-view copy of the show, not an edited network version copy, but an actual pay-per-view copy of the show. It cuts off after the next match, and the next match ends the first disc at 1 hour, 26 minutes, and 14 seconds. And the next match is about 11 minutes long. So I'd say we're probably around an hour and 10 minutes into the show at this point.
Yeah. So I'll round it and say an hour 10 in. The first hour, and yes, I kept track because I wondered, how bad it would be. The first hour had 3 promos, 3 Nitro Girl segments, and if you really want to include this one, which, yeah, it might just be a thing. Okay, I won't even include this, but included 2 pointless matches that all told, probably was about 20 minutes. All together. Because each Nitro Girl segment was about 90 seconds, and all of those promos were like 4 minutes long each.
Oh no, the Hogan Bischoff promo was an absolute pain in the ass because it literally accomplished nothing. At least the Rick Steiner Buff Bagwell promo a little bit earlier on the show had something resembling a point.
Yeah, that was to set up later on in the night. So I'll even give that one a pass. But with the Nitro Girl segments were not needed. Hogan's segment was not needed. Most of Scott Steiner's segment was not needed. Bing versus Wrath was not needed. And Finley and Alex Wright was not needed. So if you're starting to wonder, real quick, why this pay-per-view ran long, we're starting to get the answer already.
Oh, no, there's no doubt in my mind that there are a couple of things inside of this first hour that could have been cut, and this pay-per-view would have been inside of its 3-hour window. There's no doubt about that. It's just poor time management on behalf of WCW, but frankly, it wouldn't be the first or the last time that WCW would be accused of that. We're out of time for Nitro. Tune in to Thunder to see what happens next.
And even that goes back even further, like even pre-WCW days with JCP. So, but obviously we're going to still mention it a little more when we get to our main event. So, moving on, we mentioned Disco Inferno beat Juventud Guerrera. You would think that Disco would have I would put a fair guess at maybe 5 matches, because God knows this card's big enough, but at least a somewhat decent number of matches in between. Nope. Coming up next for the Cruiserweight Championship, the champion Billy Kidman defends against Disco Inferno. It's been 2 matches. So we're talking, and those 2 matches were short.
Yeah, combined in-ring time for those 2 matches is less than 10 minutes.
Yeah. And if you want to include, BS fillers, we're talking, I would, now that I look at it again, I would talk a max of 20 minutes. Mind you, Disco's first match was almost 10. And this one goes over 10. So fair play to Disco Inferno for going out and doing this. And not only going out and doing this, but having a somewhat decent match yet again. And having a fairly good match with Billy Kidman. In the end, Billy Kidman would pick up the win via the shooting star press, but I was very impressed with the fact that Disco Inferno had maybe a 20-minute break and goes out, and his 2 matches combined may have been as long as his break was between the 2 matches.
That is entirely possible, and actually I think the 2 matches combined may have been longer than the break between them.
Yeah. So absolute fair play to him. The one thing that I didn't like, and it did happen, is the fact that what move does Disco use to beat Juventud?
The jumping pile driver.
Guess what move Billy Kidman kicks out of 20 minutes later?
Yeah, well, they're showing the resiliency of Kidman as Cruiserweight Champion there. It's really not that surprising, though. Like, I can understand your beef with it, but I don't think I agree with you as far as being upset that he kicked out of it.
It's just, I mean, sure, maybe you could say, oh, he didn't get all of it, maybe he's tired, but and I'm sorry, but the more and more I see it, Billy Kidman's shooting star is bowling shoe ugly.
Well, for the time, though, I mean, yeah, obviously the innovator of the move is Jushin Liger. But for the time, though, Kidman was, I do believe, the only one in the mainstream United States using the move.
That's fair enough. And I think part of it is also I was spoiled by Evan Ward, who, in my opinion, has the greatest shooting star press of all time.
I may not like the guy, but I'm gonna make a reference here that Paul will enjoy. And I'm going to give credit to Lindsay Dorado for his shooting star press, too, because his shooting star press is probably just as impressive as Evan Bourne / Matt Seidel's.
So I think part of it is, it's just, the thing that bugs me is that Kidman leads with his knees. I think that's what bugs me, and we know that he has injured people, unfortunately, by nailing them with his knees on a shooting star press, which sucks. I want to say it was Chavo.
Yeah, it was Chavo.
Yeah. So, but getting away from just whining and moaning about all of this. Sorry. This was a fairly decent match. And like I said, surprising with the fact that Disco had such a short break. So I do kind of wonder why we didn't give Disco 2 matches in one night. That part seems weird. I'm not complaining about that. I'm not complaining about that at all. It's just weird that they would do it like this.
I mean, given what was to come up on the rest of the show, there isn't really a slot on the rest of the show where you could place this match, though.
Yeah,
I I don't understand why they didn't just have this match the next night on Nitro. But, I mean, to each their own.
Or just make it a three-way match.
Well, Juventud would be Cruiserweight champion himself soon enough. If I'm not mistaken, it may have actually happened the next night on Nitro, which would have been more reason to have Juventud go over Disco earlier on in the show and then make that the Cruiserweight title match the very next night. Because I know when they faced each other at Halloween or at World War III in 1998, it was Juventud defending the Cruiserweight title against Kidman and not Kidman defending against Juventud.
I think we're trying to think too much into WCW in 1998, unfortunately.
Yeah, we should probably move on to the tag team title and then the singles match here. And I definitely have something to say about the singles portion of this here as a longtime watcher of this era of WCW, and I'll get to that when it's my turn. But let's first talk about the tag match. So that Giant was smoking hot, huh?
Well, speaking of things of questionable, decisions, our next contest is one that was legitimately set up earlier in the night. So it is Buff Bagwell and Rick Steiner taking on the WCW World Tag Team Champions, which on this particular night were Scott Steiner and the Giant. The 552-pound Giant, which I call complete utter crap on. If Big Show is 500 pounds now, he could not have been more than 400 pounds in this paper.
Oh, no. I would imagine at his peak in WCW, Show probably weighed about 450, at 450 tops.
Yeah, because he looked so slim, and he was coming off the top rope.
Nothing says fun like Lucha Big Show. Or Lucha Giant, I guess. I got to get my time frames correct here. Nothing says fun like Lucha Giant.
Yeah. Maybe he belonged in the X Division. No limits.
This was X Division. Anything is possible.
This is true. And yes, the Giant was indeed smoking hot. That's why. Why was the Giant smoking on his way to the ring? And I'm not talking like he had a cigarette in his mouth. No, you could see the smoke. He's smoking while he's walking to the ring. Why?
Because WCW was a firm believer in the puff pass philosophy. That's how you made it onto creative back then, actually.
He was not creative?
No, he was not on creative. But Kevin Nash was, which kind of says all you need to know.
Yeah, fair enough. But that alludes to the joke that Harry made just a few moments ago of Big Show being smoking hot. That wouldn't, in reality, that wouldn't be the worst thing to even happen here. So, although I think the second time that something like that would happen, it more played into the gimmick, which was pretty much an offshoot of his real life self. We'll get to that when we get to that match. Anyway. So the way this works is if Buff and Rick beat Scott and Giants, Rick and Buff get the tag team championships, and Rick gets Scott in the ring for 15 minutes, which is weird because the match had already been set up to be Rick versus Scott, and now they're adding this stipulation because WCW.
Oh, no, actually there was a reason. Scott was avoiding a one-on-one match with his brother. He had been avoiding a one-on-one match with his brother ever since he turned on him back at Super Bowl in February of 1998. There's actually a backstory there.
Oh, fair enough. So, fair enough there.
Once again, my actual watching of WCW comes in handy on this particular episode.
Does it really?
Hey, I'm bringing the information that the people need to know. Maybe not need to know, but, you know. All right, move on.
Yeah.
Next.
And for the 937th time, I believe, give or take, 5 minutes into the match, Buff Bagwell actually proves that he's a liar and a scumbag and turns on Rick Steiner, thereby, after he runs away, turning this into a handicap match still for the tag team titles.
I would point out that Buff being a scumbag was life imitating art.
Well, okay, fair enough there.
Or art imitating life, I guess, would be more appropriate.
At least in this case, he wasn't a male gigolo yet.
Give him time. He's getting there. B, having Buff Bagwell anywhere near the WCW Tag Team titles devalued it completely, so kind of defeated the purpose right then and there. C, because nothing says WCW like Tag Team Championship partners that can't get along. It's almost like Russo arrived 6 months early.
And it's almost like WWE is almost attempting to still use that logic today. Hi, Cesaro and Sheamus. Anyway.
I'm actually enjoying Cesaro and Sheamus, but I think that has more to do with the fact that I enjoy both guys' ring work, so.
Fair enough.
Anyway, not for this broadcast. That would be something we would talk about on one of our pay-per-view broadcasts, which reminds me, the next time Patrick and I will be together will be the pay-per-view broadcast November the 20th for Survivor Series. Patrick is taking next week off due to the Shimmer tapings, so I will have a special guest co-host. I don't know who it'll be yet, but I'll find someone, and we'll cover a show to be determined. Stay tuned to the Facebook page, facebook.com/Wrestling Unwrapped, and we'll keep you up to date as far as who's joining me and what we're covering there. All right, anyway.
Real quick. Let's be honest. By next Sunday, Patrick will be dead.
Yeah, well, your dumbass doing 6 shows in 4 days, not mine. Anyways, back to what I was saying as far as this next match here. This is the match that pisses me off of this show. And, yeah, I know a lot of people, Hogan Warrior's going to upset them, and understandably so. That match is hot garbage. But the truth be told is, going into that match, you kind of have to expect hot garbage. This is a singles match that they had been teasing blowing off since February when Scott turned on Rick. And this is their first ever one-on-one match against each other in WCW. It goes less than 6 minutes.
But at the same time, it's a complete chicanery-filled blank show. And not only that, it comes just after they had a previous match as it was. Immediately after. So Rick and Scott technically join Disco Inferno as the only 3 on this match to have 2 matches in one night. If you want to include Buff Bagwell interfering in the singles match, that's 4, and Giant, that's 5. So of course you weren't going to get a full match. At the same time, you didn't need the tag match.
Okay, do you want to know the cluster frickery thing about it that pisses me off as far as this whole setup goes?
Bill Clinton interfering?
No, the cluster frickery thing is they never actually delivered that Rick Steiner, Scott Steiner one-on-one singles match.
Are you really surprised?
Well, it is WCW, so no. But as a longtime viewer of the product, they advertised it for 4 straight pay-per-views and never delivered an actual one-on-one match. That's the point that I'm making. All right. Anyways, enough said. We've spoken about this longer than it really deserves after the way that they screwed all the fans anyway. Let's go ahead and talk about the next match for the fans.
Well, technically, we only talked about the tag match. We never actually talked about Rick versus Scott. And the fact that Bill Clinton interferes.
9 billion people in the West 3rd Infantry all interfere in the match. Yes, we did. We discussed it.
No, you discussed it. Why was Buff Bagwell dressed up like Bill Clinton?
I sadly don't remember that, and I'd like to keep it that way.
Oh, all right, fine. Alrighty, so moving on after Rick versus Scott. This next match is actually a really intriguing one for me, just because I was a fan of them, even as I was a kid. Sorry, Harry. The Outsiders explode here at Halloween Havoc 98. It's Kevin Nash versus Scott Hall. And yeah, for the second time tonight, we see somebody walking out to the ring doing something that they probably shouldn't be doing. But at the same time, this played into his character at this time. And let's be honest, this would play into real-life issues that he would also have. What the hell is it with wrestling and bringing in real-life issues, especially when it has to do with alcohol? Scott Hall, Road Warrior Hawk, and I know it happened again, and for life of me, it's escaping me. But why? Anyway, Scott Hall carries a drink out to the ring with him. And Kevin Nash, to be fair, this is probably one of the few times in this time frame that Kevin Nash actually looked like he was taking this match seriously. But at the time, he was having the match against his best friend. So, of course, he's going to take it seriously. And what ends up happening, Kevin Nash pretty much just beat the high holy hell out of Scott Hall. Or Scotch Hall, if you really want. Nothing?
Oh, is it my turn now?
Sorry.
Oh, no, because I had something to say about that whole thing that you mentioned with Ed Baines against his best friend there. But you continued, so I lost my train of thought there. All right. I'm actually of the opinion that this match wasn't necessarily about what they did, but why they did it. And it's okay to have a match like that every now and then, where it's not about the moves that are done, it's about why they're being done, and why it was booked the way that it was booked. I don't hate the fact that they did a non-finish count-out for this match because of the fact that it was symbolically being used that Scott Hall was, Kevin Nash was sending a message to Scott Hall. And if you follow up on what happened in WCW and Hall helping Kevin Nash win the title 2 months later at Starrcade, you can see that the message was received. This was Kevin Nash trying to tell Scott Hall to get his stuff together, and that's not the word I was originally going to use, and making an example out of him in order to do so. I actually think that this match told a great story. It wasn't a good match by any stretch of the imagination, but it told a good story, and sometimes that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, I think this match was more about, like you said, it was more about the story than it was about the moves and what was being done in the ring, because you constantly heard Kevin Nash throughout the whole match just allude to Scott Hall's alcoholism. You know, hey, why don't we make it a double? Hey, we want another? You know, and things like that. He was constantly chirping in Scott Hall's ear. And actually, I have no problem with the count-out finish either, because, like you said, it was Kevin Nash essentially just telling Scott Hall, get your stuff together. And after the second powerbomb, Kevin Nash just said, all right, I'm done with you now. You know, it was kind of a case of, if you don't get your stuff together, I'm done with you for good. You know, come back from, you know, if you can come back, I'll give you another shot. And if you can't come back, I'm done with you. And that's pretty much what he was saying as he walked out, because he knew he had Scott Hall beat. But he didn't want to put the finishing touch on it. So I've got no problems with the count-out victory for Scott Hall, technically, even though And yeah, apparently that message would be heard loud and clear when we would finally get to 173-1, I think was the number, at Starrcade 98. So I thought job well done. Like you said, it wasn't a good match. It wasn't a great match by any means, but it did what it had to do.
Yeah, that's the point that I'm making there. This, like I said, it wasn't a match about what happened in the ring. It was about the story that was told while the match was happening. And every now and then you have to have matches like that in order to continue the wrestling narrative. And the fact is that we are storytellers, not just necessarily athletes. So, yeah, I have no issue with this one. Now, the next match on this card I have an issue with.
I can't say I'm really surprised. Can I get through the intro first for it?
By all means, go ahead.
All right, thank you. So we move on to our next match, our 10th match of the night. And you wonder why it ran long. It is Sting versus Bret the Hitman Hart for Bret's United States Championship, and this would be the time when it would be kind of goofy, but I actually didn't mind the look at all when I saw it. This was NWO Wolfpack's Sting. So he had, instead of white and black, he had red and black face paint, and he had a goatee. I really didn't mind the look at all.
Oh, no. Technically speaking, NWO Wolfpack Sting was still a babyface because the Wolfpack were the faces of the NWO split.
Yeah. Except that also leads me into one small problem in which, aside from the last match, or before the last match, the last 4 matches were all NWO matches. And you wonder why people were complaining that the NWO was too damn big. Good God. Anyway. The whole match, the match kind of boiled down to the Sharpshooter versus the Scorpion Deathlock. You know, that was kind of a minor set point of this match because Sting uses a Scorpion Deathlock, which is, I don't even want to say variation. It's the Sharpshooter. You know, they're almost the exact same thing. So
they are the exact same move. It's just, it just depends on which version of it that you go with is the basis of it. Bret's version or Ricky Choshu's version, which I do believe he actually called the Scorpion Deathlock, which is where Sting got it from.
Yeah. So moving past that, though, Bret and Sting, you would expect a pretty good match. You know, Bret's always been very good in the ring. Sting has always been fairly good in the ring, I'd say. Maybe not, you know, a top-class technical wrestler, but he's more than held his own all the way back since, like, the first Clash of the Champions when he faced Flair for 45 minutes. So, Sting can go. I found this match boring.
Boring with a bad finish. Like, they knew they were going to a crap finish, so it's like neither one of them cared to get there.
Yeah, that almost does seem like what it would be, because they would, yet again, end up taking out the ref, and Sting would, or rather, Bret would hit Sting with 4 shots with the baseball bat, I believe.
Which, might I add, a clearly rubber baseball bat.
Yeah. Which, here's my question. Would you rather him hit Sting with a real baseball bat 4 times?
I'd rather him hit Sting with a real bat once for validity.
It's kind of one of those things. My guess is they had a choice. You could either fake hit him with a real baseball bat, or you real hit him with a fake baseball bat, and they chose the latter.
Well, yeah, not to mention WCW wasn't real big on the whole international objects thing either, so there's that too.
Yeah. So, like I said, calling them international objects. Good Lord, WCW. What the hell is wrong with you? Anyway. As a matter of fact, I think the only time they would call them foreign objects was in Ready to Rumble.
Yes, because David Arquette was King Special.
In 12. Anyway, moving on. So, yeah, this match was the complete polar opposite of what you would expect. You know, Sting, while maybe not being a top-class performer, is usually, and almost always was, pretty damn good at keeping a crowd into the match. You know, he got probably one of the best reactions out of the crowd at Slamboree 2000. So he's doing God's work there. Pardon the pun. But this match was bad. You know, you could tell that they just did not give a rat's ass about this match. And
like I said, it goes back to the way that it was booked to finish, too. Now, Bret Hart, when he came into WCW, was viewed by many to possibly be the savior of WCW. You look at, excuse me, you look at his opening match against Ric Flair at Sold Out in 1998, and it was actually really good, other than the fact that there really wasn't any reason for them to be fighting other than it's Ric Flair and Bret Hart. This is a match that you would think that they would have been able to do some kind of major build towards. But they never actually ended up getting there.
If they don't, and it makes the whole thing just eh. So, but yes, in the end, Bret Hart retains the U.S. Championship. I don't even remember how the hell they did it, because it wasn't a tap out. I don't even think it was a pin. Yeah, pass out. Probably, yeah.
It was a pass out. The referee came back too after the baseball shots while Sting was knocked out inside of the sharpshooter.
And that would be where Harry's point about Bret beating Sting via stretcher job would come into play, because, to his credit, I'll give him all the credit in the world for this one, Sting doesn't move. He does not move an inch. In the entire time from after the last baseball shot until he goes to the back, he does not move until basically he moves his arm when they're about to load him into the ambulance. I'll give him all the credit in the world for that. He really played into it, thank God. He's probably one of the few people that at this point actually did give a damn and wanted it to look good, because as we know, by this point in, October of 1998, most of WCW didn't give a damn. Thank you, Creative Control and Guaranteed Contracts. Way to go, Eric.
Word.
Speaking of Eric, his pet's up next. Oh, this is going to be tough.
No, it's not. Hogan gets his win back, brother. We move on. Main event time. All right. No?
No. We can't. You know we can't. We're somewhat more professional.
You might be. I'm not. Next.
Our next, at least, we'll hopefully keep this short and sweet. Hopefully.
Short maybe, sweet definitely not.
Okay, fair enough. Our next contest, our double main event, because they high holy hell out of this.
Wait, real quick here, because I have a thought for you here. Up until, by and large, up until Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, it was a pretty good show. Bret Hart and Sting, and then this match right here are kind of where the bottom drops out.
I would say Scott Hall and Kevin Nash is included in good, at least decent. It starts going downhill with Bret and Sting, but it's kind of on a small incline. Here's where the bottom drops out.
Yeah, it's like that roller coaster where you have that slight drop and then that massive plummet. This is the plummet. Okay, go ahead with your description.
Yes. So, the rematch of the decade, which, to be fair, they hyped the high holy hell out of this one, and boy did Hulk Hogan stick his middle finger out to the fans for this one. The rematch 8.5 years later. The Warrior versus Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Once again, no ultimate. Oh, God. I'll say this.
You know why there was no ultimate, right? Because if there had been alternate Vince, his lawyers would have come crashing down and it would have hurt inside.
I think it would have hurt inside and out.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah.
My God. Please carry
Hi,
on.
Sean.
I just made a real American joke so bad.
That's hurting
Sean,
me inside right now.
I made a real American joke so bad, Sean felt the need to come back onto the broadcast. I feel accomplished. All right, carry on, Patrick.
All right. So, what happens when you have two guys that really don't give a rat's, or really one guy that doesn't care because he knows he's got his guaranteed money, and the other one who knows he's going to lose? You get what is regarded, and let's be honest, a fair regarding, as the worst match of the year, one of the worst matches of the decade, and is one of the very rare matches that, yes, I'm going to bring him up only because of this reason, one of the very few matches that Dave Meltzer himself gave -5 stars.
I think in his updated review,
God.
I think in his updated review he actually gave it -4.
In the beginning, I know he gave it -5. I know he did. You have a match that Eric Bischoff regrets. You had a match that the Ultimate Warrior regrets. Funny, Hogan doesn't. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Hogan did take the blame for it being a bad match because of the really major spot that ends up botched. And oh, by the way, that was the finish of all of the things to mess up. This was slow. They didn't care. And Hogan messing up and burning himself. I love that. He legitimately, because he threw up the fireball, burns his eyebrows and mustache. Sorry. This is instant karma for Hogan for all the crap we've had to deal with.
Can I just point out the fact that Patrick is taking glee in how terribly awkward this match came off?
I know. I've watched it more recently.
The match is complete and total laughs. Don't get me wrong. I generally don't give negative stars. I try to avoid it. I think it's disrespectful. But if there were ever a match that I would give negative stars to, this would most certainly be a candidate. And that explains that.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no. I got to find my phone charger. Carry on.
Okay. The thing was, the match didn't start out that bad. I would say the first 5 minutes were not that bad, although they did try to redo the famous scene from Toronto with the Greco-Roman knuckle lock, and it doesn't work. But after that, something happens, and the bottom falls out on it. And then what also doesn't help is because of the fact that the fireball that was supposed to end the match goes up in Hogan's face. And I'm not kidding when I say that. It burned his mustache and his eyebrows. The famous mustache. Now they have to figure out, okay, what the hell do we do now? And they end up bringing on a finish that makes 0 sense because of something that had just happened 6 nights prior. When Horace Hogan comes out and clobbers the Warrior with a steel chair over the head. Mind you, this comes, once again, 6 nights after Hulk Hogan clobbered Horace Hogan in the head with a chair and the rest of the NWO beat him down. And then Hogan finishes the whole match and saying, oh, you passed the test. Bull. Bull, bull, bull. Yes?
I would say the argument could be made for tough love. That's the best I got there.
So you're going to have Hulk do with Horace what Kevin Nash is trying to do with Scott Hall?
More or less.
Yeah. Bull. But yes, Hogan ends up getting his win back, and if I recall, I don't even know that the Warrior comes back after this.
He does not. This is his last appearance.
Wait, when would War Games have been? Would that have been 2 months prior then?
The month before. September.
No, the month before was World War III.
No, the month after was World War III.
It couldn't have been because Page got his title shot from winning World War III.
No, Page won Fall Brawl. Kevin Nash won World War III. Because World War III.
All right, yeah.
World War III was in the palace. World War III was in the palace at Auburn Hills, aka Kevin Nash's backyard.
Weird. I could have sworn they said DDP won World War III to get the title match. All right.
He won War Games.
Okay. Oops. So yes, Hogan wins in a complete shit show. Sorry, Sean. And we never hear from the Warrior again, and he takes his money and goes home. Alrighty.
If you would like a more specific review of this match, I can sum it up for you in about 4 words. You ready?
Go ahead.
There you go. Summed up.
Yeah, pretty much. All right. Now, before we get to our main event, there's something else we have to talk about because it occurs during the main event.
Is this my mentioning of the fact that the last time WCW would win the ratings war?
Yes, this would. Or, you know what? Maybe we should mention how good of a match this was first. But you know what? Maybe we will go with the match first.
No, let's get over the issue with everything that happened as far as the broadcast of the show, because I don't feel it appropriate to take away from the match by having to talk about the bad part after. Let's talk about the bad part before, and then we'll talk about the match itself.
All right, fair enough. So while I was watching on the network, and I made complete sure to pay attention to this, the version that I had was 3 hours and 15 minutes plus so many seconds. At Michael Buffer's introduction, the very start of Michael Buffer's introduction was 2 hours and 57 minutes in. And I paid attention to the part where most people say the feed was cut off, which would have been when Goldberg and Page were tumbling out of the ring. That occurs almost exactly at 3:05. Like, legitimately, like 3:04:57, and we get to 3:05, and they're outside. That's usually the point that most people say the feed cut off. For about half of the country, give or take, because some pay-per-view companies did carry it the full way through. Not all. As a matter of fact, I think most of the bigger ones didn't. They would not see most of this match. Possibly, depending on when it would be, any of it. As the feed would cut out during the early parts of Goldberg and Page, to the point that they got so many calls and complaints that not only did WCW be forced to refund most of the money, or at least half of the money because of everyone that didn't get the main event,
they refunded. So just real quick here, I'm going to chime in and help with this because I actually know the story probably a little bit better than you do because I am familiar with the whole surrounding the show. They refunded everybody. They refunded everybody on a pay-per-view provider that cut off the feed for the main event. If your pay-per-view carrier kept the feed on, you were not refunded.
So there you go. Resulting in them not only losing millions of dollars in pay-per-view revenue, but
millions? Yeah,
would
stretch.
Anyway, but they would also lose a chunk of revenue because WCW pretty much had no choice but to replay the following match that we're going to get to in a moment the next night on Nitro.
As I mentioned before, this would be the last time WCW would win the ratings war for that very reason, and the fact that they had to replay the main event of their $30 pay-per-view the very next night, pretty much negating any real possibility for fans to want to order the replay the following night, Tuesday. Because this was back in a world where pay-per-views would air on Sunday. There would be the Monday night show the next night, and then the replay for said pay-per-view, because back then they only really showed stills of what happened at the pay-per-view. The replay for said pay-per-view, if they generated enough interest on you, could be purchased the very next night after the episode of Raw or Nitro that you were watching, depending on your preference.
Yeah, and this was also at a time where they would not show the pay-per-view again immediately after.
Yeah, no access on the network in like 3 days, within 48 hours.
48 hours, 20 minutes. But I'm talking because I know that by the time we would get to 2000, WWE pay-per-views would have their replay immediately after. And sometimes I think it actually was included in your price if you bought the live feed. So you would get the live feed and then would, within 10 minutes, immediately get a replay of it.
Yes. And a lot of the major companies would do that as well. Interestingly enough, since we're talking about companies that did that, TNA does not do that. If you purchased the TNA pay-per-view, the immediate replay was not included with your purchase.
Yeah. So needless to say, we've talked Starrcade 97 before, haven't we?
We've discussed it. I don't think we actually covered the show.
Okay. Many people consider it to be Starrcade 97 to be the first bullet hole in the death of WCW. This possibly, if this isn't the death blow, it's damn close. And you could say the finger poke of doom, which would occur 2 months later, 2.5 months later. Yeah.
I would say the finger poke.
Very well. Sorry, go ahead.
I would say the finger poke is the death of WCW as we knew it, but this was the beginning of the end financially for the company.
Yeah, because you're talking about a refund of a lot of money.
Hundreds of thousands. I don't know
what the pay-per-view buy was this. Sorry. I would love to know what the pay-per-view buy of this was.
Well, if you give me a few moments, I can answer that question for you because I am right now checking into the Wikipedia page to see if they have that information for us.
It doesn't.
And
because I'm on that.
The answer is that unfortunately it does not have the information.
Yeah.
It's all right. I have other ways.
Okay. So needless to say, this would possibly be one of the biggest mistakes that WCW would do. But at the same time, as we've covered already, WCW really has nobody to blame but themselves. It's never fully been made known if it was intentional that they wanted to run so long or if the pay-per-view was just running long because God knows there was so much filler. It was ungodly. There were, over the span of the pay-per-view, I believe, 3 5-minute promos, 15 minutes right there. I'll knock out the Steiner and Bagwell one. because that one was necessary to set up later in the night. So you have 2 5-minute promos that weren't necessary in Scott Steiner and Hulk Hogan. You had at least 4 Nitro Girl segments, because why? And they said it was the first time they were doing that. Those were 90 seconds each. So you're talking another 6 minutes there. So I'm already at 16 minutes of useless stuff.
And I can tell you that having owned both shows before and after, the Nitro Girls did not appear on Fall Brawl or World War III 1998.
Of course. And then you had 2 matches that weren't needed.
All right, real quick, before we go back over the history of how we got to the point of the pay-per-view feed cutting, I actually have a buy rate answer for you. You ready?
Okay.
The buy rate for this show was .78, which equates roughly numerically to 286,316 buys.
Boy.
Now, if that's our baseline here, let me get my calculator out here, because I believe, I want to say WCW pay-per-views at this time were probably about $29 a month. Sounds about right, anyways.
Round it to 30. Just round it to 30.
$29.99, close enough, whatever. Let me get my calculator. Go ahead and continue your rant while I do this math.
Okay. So, needless to say, between Wrath and Main being on this card, between Finley and Alex Wright being on this card, and you could make a stretch and say that Hoovy and Disco really wasn't needed for this card, or you could throw the other one and say Kidman and Disco wasn't needed. Either way, you're knocking out another 10 minutes there. Throw all of that out. That's 16 plus 10, that's 26, plus the 2 other pointless matches is probably another 8. You're looking at 36 minutes that you don't need. Throw out that 36 minutes and you finish at about 2:53. 2 hours and 53 minutes of the full pay-per-view. Congratulations, your fee doesn't get cut off and you don't have to refund millions of dollars potentially.
Estimating $29.99 a purchase, 8,586,616. You may have been onto something when you say that this mistake cost them millions of dollars.
You could round off and say 30%. Take what's 30% of that total?
$2,575,000.
$2.5 million would be millions of dollars. And no, I'm not making the primetime players joke here because it's really not worth it.
No, you're absolutely correct in your assessment here, and I apologize for doubting your math here. I would be curious as to how many people they did have to reimburse there, and that's something that I would really like to. I know Sean has a. Sean, are you still listening to us?
Yes, I'm here.
I know you have. I know you subscribe to the Observer, right?
Yes.
Would you be able to check back into the old digital versions of the Observer and see if they give any information as far as like the whole situation goes with the cancellation of the pay-per-view feed?
Okay. Just like the story that's going on with it?
And if they give anything resembling a number as to how many people they had to reimburse?
Okay, when is it? It's October 20-something, right?
October 25th. October 25th, 1998. We don't have to talk about it tonight on the show. We can tease the Facebook page here by mentioning that we'll have this conversation over on the Facebook page at facebook.com/Wrestling Unwrapped.
Okay, well, let me look and see what I can find here.
In addition, we'll also talk about this on the Wrestling to the Max page as well, facebook.com/Wrestling to the Max. Thank you, Mr. Producer, sir.
Thank you, Sean.
All right.
So,
back Back to the match itself now that we've taken the time to discuss the situation surrounding the match here. The unfortunate fact of the situation here is this is the best match of Goldberg's career. And
many regard this as one of the best matches in Halloween Havoc history. One of.
Patrick, you know who my favorite wrestler is?
Yes.
Would you believe that when I first started watching wrestling again, that wasn't actually the case?
I know, because you've mentioned it before.
When I first got back into wrestling by purchasing the VHS tapes that I purchased, Chris Jericho was not my favorite wrestler at that time. It's over the years that I've grown an appreciation for Jericho's work. When I first got back into professional wrestling, my favorite wrestler was Diamond Dallas Page.
You have mentioned that, just so you know. So I knew where you were going because I knew that's what it was. Real quick, before we get too far in, it is our main event, the final match, the 12th match of the damn night, the match that was so good nobody got to see. The champion, the undefeated, 154-0, supposedly, WCW World Heavyweight Champion Goldberg takes on the number one contender after winning the War Games match 1 month prior, Diamond Dallas Page. It's essentially the champ versus the people's champion.
And I would point out that him and The Rock had that people's champion nickname at almost exactly the same time.
But the thing about it, you could make an argument for either guy. You really could. Although The Rock did it at this point, he would have been going right into corporate Rock. So he would have been doing it as a taunt to the fans, whereas DDP was embracing it with the fans.
Wrong. He would not become corporate Rock until November of 1998 at the Survivor Series.
I said going into corporate Rock.
But that means that he wasn't yet doing it to stick it to the people. He was actually at this point still the people's champion.
Boy, you're stretching here. We're a month away from corporate Rock. 1 month.
Not even a month. Probably like 3 weeks.
Yeah. Boy, you're stretching.
I know. Just go with it. Moving on.
So, but it is the people's champion versus the world champion. And, I mean, it's not a technical masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, but they have a pretty damn good match. And like you said, probably the best of Goldberg's career, and I would agree. God knows, because we recently covered what he did in WWE, which is and really he would never get any better with anybody else in WCW.
There actually is a WWE match that I would put up there, and it's against my other favorite wrestler, Chris Jericho, from Bad Blood 2003.
I think we mentioned that a couple weeks ago. I think you mentioned that.
We talked about that when we covered Survivor Series 2003.
Yeah. Correct. So, and this was another one where Goldberg did not have to do much, but he was able to do enough. You know, you had to wonder, could he pull off the jackhammer after he hurts his shoulder? And originally that answer was no, and that would lead into, I think in most people's minds, the absolute closest that the streak could have come to ending without actually ending when DDP hits the diamond cutter, but takes a little too long on the cover from it, and Goldberg ends up kicking out. And in the end, yes, it is, once again, the jackhammer that does DDP in. But
yeah, you'll notice you said there, though, it was the jackhammer that does DDP and not the spear jackhammer combo. Page actually went for a suplex for the finish, and Goldberg reversed it into the jackhammer. There was no spear to set up the jackhammer for the finish.
Which, the problem is, and I know that some people would have a problem with it, would you, having no spear is evident, would you say him still hitting the jackhammer no sells the shoulder?
Well, given the fact that he actually uses the off arm, I believe he used the other arm to lift for the jackhammer, I don't think it does. If I'm not mistaken, he lifted him up on the side opposite of the shoulder that went into the ring post. I could be wrong on that. I'd have to go back and rewatch again and examine more carefully. But I don't think he uses the shoulder that went into the ring post as the cradle arm for the jackhammer.
Trying to remember, because if I recall correctly, he always speared using his left shoulder. Trying to remember the image of the jackhammer if he uses his right side. For life, I can't remember.
Yeah, I would have to go back and rewatch the finish from the shoulder of the ring post all the way up to the jackhammer to give you a more specific answer to that question. Here's my question for you. Without the spear setup, do you think Page should have kicked out of the jackhammer?
That's a tough call. That's actually a tougher call than it might seem. Because
just real quick, the reason I asked this question is because the Diamond Cutter was widely considered death in WCW. As soon as that move was hit, it was over. And Goldberg kicked out of the Diamond Cutter, even with the delayed pinfall. Because he had hit it before with the delayed fall, and it's still been the finish. The argument could be made that it would have brought Page up to an even higher plane as well by having him kick out of the jackhammer there, and then Goldberg could have used the spear jackhammer combo for the finish, assuming that he was able to hit the spear with the correct shoulder.
Which may have been the issue. Because DDP is one of the kind that has been very widely known to lay his matches out. So, for him, if he, tried to throw a curveball in there like that, it may have actually flustered Goldberg a little too much. But I think at this point they did not want, and I ask that you let me finish what I'm about to say. Okay?
I'm listening.
I don't think they would have wanted to do anything that would have made Goldberg feel like he was going to move down a level at all. They wanted to keep him larger than life, essentially to, book him into the ground with Nash 2 months later, but my thinking is they still wanted him to be the man. So, from a booking standpoint, I can kind of understand why they wouldn't have Page kick out of the jackhammer. From a personal standpoint, yeah, I think it would have been an awesome thing to see. Granted, that would have meant you would have had to extend the match by a few minutes, and possibly into longest match of the night territory, which, once again, this match doesn't even sniff the longest match, thanks Warrior and Hogan. But
you're actually wrong. Warrior Hogan is second.
Tag titles?
0 for 2.
Bret and Sting.
Yes, Bret and Sting at 1504.
I forgot the Bret Hart match on the card.
I have the info if you guys want it.
Oh, well, alrighty then.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well,
Information. Wait, real quick here. Yeah, let's issue a disclaimer here. Information now being provided courtesy of the Wrestling Observer Archives, www.wrestlingobserver.com.
Yeah, so like Harry said, I have a subscription here, so it's not like I'm taking this from something else. He estimates that the cost between Time Warner and WCW that they lost because of all the all the cable companies cutting it off was $2 million. And that they had so many calls from people being pissed off for 2 days that the cable company as a whole was upset because a scripted wrestling show was causing them to increase all these man hours and everything way into the night to hear people complaining. And they were either giving some kind of pay-per-view rebate or a replay, and almost everybody took the rebate instead of watching the replay for free. He says it wasn't a ratings ploy, that it was a total screw-up by WCW. They didn't tell the cable companies in enough time that they had planned for the show to go 3 hours and 15 minutes. The show actually wound up going about 3 hours and 22 minutes, but he puts the blame on WCW for not telling Viewers' Choice and the rest of the cable companies that they were going long.
There you go. And $2 million would be roughly in the ballpark of about 20, maybe a little under 25%.
No, actually, given the $8 million number that we came up with earlier, $2 million is actually right about 25% exactly. So about a fourth of the people that ordered the pay-per-view ended up getting refunded.
One way or another.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much, Sean.
No problem.
Again, information courtesy of David Meltzer's in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, www.wrestlingobserver.com. I just wanted to make sure we put the plug out there for his newsletter since we were using the information from the newsletter on the program.
Well, and since we're doing it, this is the November 2nd, 1998 edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, just to put that all out there for transparency.
So that would have been the second newsletter after this pay-per-view, which
right.
the time would make sense.
Yeah, because you would need, the immediate after newsletter for the pay-per-view would just have the pay-per-view results and the ratings, whereas any of the fallout from, anything
well,
that
actually,
happened...
he didn't, because the Observer, that it's actually dated post the pay-per-view, but it actually was written before the pay-per-view, so this is the one that comes after the pay-per-view, and it does have his ratings and everything else for that pay-per-view on here.
Huh.
So, which they gave Hogan and Warrior out of the 89 people that voted, Hogan Warrior was the worst match from 82 people.
Here's my question. What the hell
those
did those other 7 people vote?
The 7 people voted Meng versus Wrath as the worst match.
Okay.
Oh, that's not fair to Haku. Be nice to Haku, you Grumposaurus.
Goldberg and DDP was best match for 43 people, with Kidman and Disco Inferno coming in second.
That's a load of talk. But okay. These are probably people that voted on... Yeah, these were probably people that voted on the Wrestling Observer hotline back then, because, Meltzer had his own hotline back in this time frame as well.
Or they just sent him by mail the votes or whatever.
Wait, my question, was Meltzer's phone number 1-900-909-9901?
No.
Okay, you're gonna laugh at that, but give me crap for my it all comes crashing down and it hurts inside. All right, I see how you are, Garmer. Thank you for your help.
And officially, in this Observer that I'm reading, it is -5 stars.
Ha ha!
All right, the original rating was, and I've mentioned that the original rating was -5, but I think it's been downgraded or upgraded, I guess technically, to -4.
All right. We should move on here real quick and wrap this match up and then get to the big finish here.
Well,
so moving on real quick.
Yeah, let's get back to the match itself here. I really don't think there's any question that this is pretty easy. And as far as the best match in Halloween Havoc history, I have to disagree with you because I just had this conversation with one of my friends a couple of days ago. The best match in Halloween Havoc history is Ray and Eddie from Havoc 97.
Well, I said one of. I didn't say the. I said one of. But I would think if you were to put it in the top five, I mean, we're kind of, in my case, kind of playing the big finish already, but I would put it up there because of the fact that Page got such a good match out of Goldberg. It got one of the longer matches of Goldberg's career at this point. You know, aside from maybe, I don't even think the Raven match goes that long. The Hogan match damn sure doesn't go that long. So while it's only 10 minutes, it's still one of the better and longer Goldberg matches ever.
I'm actually reloading the Halloween. I'm reloading the Halloween Havoc Wikipedia page because I'm going to release a top 5 Halloween Havoc match list on the Facebook group, on the Facebook page.
Fair enough. Why don't we get to the big finish real quick?
Let's do it.
All right. So as always, it is time for the big finish, our best and our worst match of the night, and our cash and our trash, and then of course the final rating. All right. Why don't we go in reverse a little bit this time? Why don't we start with the best match? Because I know Harry and I are going to disagree on there, but I kind of already plugged what my best match is going to be. So, Harry, why don't you start?
Yeah, I told you I was going to give you my list of the top 5 matches in Halloween Havoc history. People making the argument for this is the best match in Halloween Havoc history. It's not even the best match on this pay-per-view. My match of the night is Jericho Raven.
I mean, I can understand why. I mean, and yeah, it is a very good match. The one thing it did do is it served its purpose of getting the crowd into the pay-per-view. Unfortunately, they kind of lost that momentum.
Well, my point being, as far as Jericho and Raven goes too, is yeah, the match is a little bit shorter than Goldberg and Page's, but it's also, in my opinion, a little bit more action-packed than Goldberg and Page's. I think Goldberg and Page told a better story, and for the first time in his WCW career, Goldberg actually legitimately sold like a professional wrestler. And I mean that in all sincerity in this instance here. I'm not knocking the guy again. I'm giving him credit here. His selling of the shoulder in this match is really good, and one of the few times that he was properly able to do so. That being said, I think there's a more cohesive story told in the Raven and Jericho match, specifically being that Raven may not care about WCW, but he realizes that if he beats Jericho for the television title, that gives him more leverage when it comes to his negotiations with WCW and either getting a better spot in the company or getting out altogether. So my match of the night goes to Chris Jericho and Raven. Are you going with DDP and Goldberg, Patrick?
Yes, I'm going with DDP and Goldberg. Sue me.
Oh, no. It's 1A, 1B, really.
But yeah, I would say Goldberg and Page, just because I thought they did tell a hell of a story. I would actually go so far as to say not the best story on the show. I do think Nash and Hall told a better story, but I mean, like you said, this was still at a time when Goldberg was still steamrolling people. You know, 155-0. Cough, cough. Was you know a phenomenon? Huh? I know. Yeah, I know. That's why I said cough, cough. Thank you. You know, was a phenomenon unto itself, and once again, it would end 2 months later at Starrcade 1998, thanks to Scott Hall. But
more specifically, thanks to Big Poochie, not so much Scott Hall.
Well, to be fair, I mean, he did have the stun gun.
Okay, but Kevin Nash was the booker.
Well, okay, if you're going on that route, then yeah. Just trying to keep it within the show, Harry. Anyway, you know, Paige, I would sit here. I'll go this far. Paige brought the best out of Goldberg. Let's go that far. Okay? And Paige probably carried Goldberg to the best match of Goldberg's career. And I would say the best match of Goldberg's career overall, including that bad blood match against Chris Jericho, which I still have to go back and watch again. But, yeah, I thought from the story they told, Goldberg, for once, nailing everything, I would absolutely rank this match up there because thank God this match went last. Imagine if Hogan and Warrior went last.
Well, I can, and here's why. Because if Hogan and Warrior went last, it would have been cut off, and those people wouldn't have wanted their refunds.
It probably still would have wanted their refunds, considering, you know, that it was the big rematch and probably the most hyped match out there. Okay, real quick, are we going to agree on the worst match of the night?
That depends. If you're going to agree that it's Saturn and Lodi, yes. No, of course it's Hogan and Warrior. There's no doubt.
Yeah, okay. Worst match of the year, worst match of the decade. I can't even remember how many awards this match won in terms of worst.
I'm half tempted to go back and see how it compares to the worst matches we've ever covered. Because God knows it has to be up there.
Anytime we were actually doing a rating, we would give a dud at worst. I would push this further down. Sorry, I know you don't like negative, you think it's disrespectful, but just admit it.
I actually do remember giving this show a rating before, and I actually do think I put this match at -2 stars.
There you go.
And I never get negative star ratings.
Now the question becomes, is this Anna Manushka and Mistress Belmont bad? Because we've called that the worst match that we've covered.
God, that is well, here's the thing. Is as offensive as Anna and Mistress was, it was about half the length of this match. So I don't think we can keep Anna and Belmont there. Because while it's not just as bad, it was half as long.
It still wasn't as bad as that one was. Uh-oh, did I lose Harry? Oh, well.
No, I'm still here.
Oh. So, yeah, I think Warrior and Hogan may actually rank in there now as the worst matches covered.
I think we need to go back through the archives and pick up our star ratings again and possibly post them to the W2Mnet.com website. We've been talking about doing that for a while. We need to actually get off our asses and really do it.
Yeah, we might as well at this point. So, moving on. What's your cash?
What's my what?
Your cash. What's good?
I think we're going to agree on the trash because it's pretty apparent as to what the trash of this show was. So why don't we go ahead and get that out of the way there? Because I don't think there's any question that when it comes to this show, the trash is the time management, right?
In the words of that guy who once ran for New York mayor, the length is too damn long.
It's just there's only so much time that you get given for these pay-per-views, and if you figure out in advance that your show's going to run long, then you need to let the cable companies know in time for them not to cut your feed off.
That's a common sense thing. But that's the most amazing part of this.
You would think something like that would be common sense, but nope.
It's not even the fact that they've let the show run long. That's not the part that always gets me with this. It's the fact that not that they let the show run long, It's the fact that they didn't tell anybody that the show was going to run long. It's the absurd part about it. How do you do that?
And not to mention, they're not in a position where Vince is nowadays, where if Vince's shows run long, I guarantee you ain't not a cable company in the world going to cut his pay-per-view early.
That's if there's any pay-per-views companies that actually still carry him.
Time Warner does.
Really?
I can tell you for sure Time Warner does, because I have Time Warner Cable here, and they're advertising Survivor Series.
Comcast, of course, does as well, so NBC and them own the, they're all together there.
Well, yeah, fair enough.
Not to mention, you have to consider, Patrick, that there are some people like myself that actually don't have streaming capabilities. My internet and my computer are not fast enough for me to run the network in my apartment. So if it were to come to that I had to, I could eventually get to the point where I had to order a pay-per-view, then I would consider ordering a pay-per-view. I mean, I'd probably order it on a delay that I knew it was worth ordering. But my point remains in that, like I said, there are still plenty of people out there who don't have the technology to be able to get the network on any kind of streaming device.
Well, fair enough, and I wasn't at all. I wasn't at all knocking that. You know, by no means was I. I didn't realize that Comcast and Time Warner actually still did carry them. I thought Time Warner dumped them off after the network came up. That's what surprised me, but absolutely. And I mean, going even to earlier this year, you know, the rumors came out that WWE had warned cable companies that WrestleMania 32 was going to run long, but I think they only said by like 15 or 20 minutes, and that one proceeded to run almost 5 hours, the actual show itself. But what's the one thing you didn't hear about? Sure, you heard the complaints that the show was too damn long, but what complaint did you not hear after? You didn't hear about feeds cutting out. You didn't hear about cable companies, you know, dumping off or having to refund money because WrestleMania 32 ran too long.
I think the pre-show actually doesn't air on the pay-per-view thing.
It doesn't.
So, yeah, so it's only the 4 hours. And they have that hour in between the replay that allows them to do that.
Well, a lot of the old pay-per-views, they used to go directly into the replay, so that wasn't really an option. But then, so if that's why you could pretty much set your clock by those old pay-per-views and the fact that they were going to go off the air at 47 after.
Yeah, because my former neighbor, I would go to their house I would go there twice a month, every month for WCW and for WWE. And WWE, like Harry just said, you could set your clock to it, that was going to be off the air at my time, local time, Central, 9:50. You could set your clock to it, and then you'd have the either viewer's choice or on demand, or rather in demand, depending on which pay-per-view company you were using. I think I had viewer's choice originally. Would always have that splat screen up 10 minutes until the replay. You could set your clock to that. So when something runs long, it does throw you off. But I always thought that the WWE pay-per-view replays also started right at the top of the hour, which is why I was surprised there were no complaints about 32 running so long. Because it does. It ran almost 5 hours, which is ungodly. That's insane. Can't wait till Survivor Series.
Pay-per-view and pre-show are going to be a combined 6 hours in 2 weeks.
Don't freaking remind me. Anyway, moving back to this pay-per-view, now that we have the trash done, what is your cash for this?
I'm actually going to, this might surprise you, I'm actually going to give credit to the booker of this show for this one. And interestingly enough, the booker of the show is the man in the match. I want to give credit for the story that was told in the Kevin Nash and Scott Hall match. Yeah, the match itself is not great, but I mean, let's be honest, at this point in their careers, you really weren't going to get any more great matches out of either of them. And to my knowledge, you really don't. I can't think of any Kevin Nash match or Scott Hall match in WCW that stands out. I mean, other than the 6-man which side is he on match from Bash at the Beach '96. So
you had to call it that. You really had to call it that.
Well, it needs more. It needs more Bobby Heenan, and my voice is too scratchy to do the Bobby Heenan voice right now. So,
all right.
As far as what I was about to say, though, is when it comes to this Kevin Nash and Scott Hall match here, it's like I said when we were discussing the match earlier. It's sometimes what happens in a match.
And I believe Harry just got cut off for the 2-hour limit on his phone. So I'm going to go ahead and give my cash. And unfortunately, Harry's a jerk and stole mine. Because I was actually going to say the storytelling as well, because there were a lot of great stories that were told during this. Chris Jericho and Raven just not caring anymore now that he doesn't have the flock anymore. I thought the Nash and Hall story being told was absolutely phenomenal. And Page and Goldberg telling a relatively good story, even though they really didn't have much of a story going into their match. And unfortunately, it kind of makes it seem a little bit like filler, but they still got the job done. Are you back, Harry?
Yes, I am. Where did I drop?
You were pretty much talking about that you weren't going to get any 5-star matches. I already gave my cash, actually, while you were gone, that you weren't going to get any 5-star matches out of Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. But while the matches weren't that good,
Yeah, you're not going to get any great athletic matches here, and really the only real great athletic matches we talked about, and I know you did hear this part, was me calling it the which side is he on match.
Yeah, and I said I couldn't believe you called it that.
Yeah, and that was probably right around the time that I dropped. But the point that I was making there is that, so while you're not going to get maybe anything blow away athletically there, they can still tell a story in the ring, and I think that they told the story perfectly for this match. So, yeah, while the match itself is probably about 2.5 stars, in terms of entertainment value, it's easily 4-ish.
Then I'll just give a shorter version of mine again so that you can actually hear it this time. I called you a jerk while you were off the air because you stole mine, because I was actually going to give credit to the overall storytelling being told. With the fact of Jericho and Raven's not caring anymore now that he really doesn't have the flock anymore, being a pretty good story being told, and then Page and Goldberg also telling a relatively good story, even though their feud really was a filler feud until Goldberg could take on Kevin Nash at Starrcade. And even that wouldn't really be geared up until after Kevin Nash wins World War III in November. And like you just mentioned with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, I thought that was the best storytelling of the night. You know, like I said, it just sucks that Page and Goldberg, had their issue in the fact that a lot of people didn't see their match. As much as a quarter of, the pay-per-view buys didn't see their match, which sucks. Alrighty. So, one final thing. Well, two final things before we get out of here, but before we can get to the last thing. What is your final rating for WCW Halloween Havoc 1998?
Now, there have been a lot of shows that we've covered on this particular podcast that have been pretty easy to rate. There have been a lot of shows that we've covered on this particular podcast that have been very difficult to rate. I think this is one of those ones that's very difficult to rate, actually, because, don't get me wrong, the bottom drops out on this show for the semi-main and then the match right before it, with the despicable, for lack of a better way, that the Bret Hart and Sting match came across, in that the Bret Hart that we've known and loved for years was pissed all over by WCW by the fact that he took such a cheap win against a guy like Sting in their very first major singles encounter, to Hogan and Warrior being the ultimate, for lack of a better phrase, shit show that it was. But then at the same time, you have Goldberg and Diamond Dallas Page in easily the best match of Goldberg's career, one of the best matches in Diamond Dallas Page's career, and like you said, a top 5 match in WCW Halloween Havoc history. And you have Jericho Raven, which we talked about, may be the best opening match that we've covered here on Wrestling Unwrapped. It makes it really difficult to get a good feel on this show as far as an overall rating. The filler in the beginning hour of the show drags this thing down for me. But at the same time, it's not enough to drag it down to the levels of the depths that some of the WCW shows that would come do. I'm going to put this show at a 6.
Crap.
What's up, Llama?
I have the exact same score. The exact same score, because I had that number in my head for legitimately many of the exact same reasons you just said. Because I found this one to be very difficult to try and rate. And it's partially, like you said, a combination of Jericho and Raven having such a good opener. You had Goldberg and Page in a very good main event, but then you have the filler, of at least those matches 2, 3, and 4. I'll give some clearance for match number 3, though, the number 1 contenders cruiserweight match. So I'll give some leeway for that one. And then you have the god-awful Hogan and Warrior match, very much deserving of every award that it's ever been awarded. But then you also have a little bit of the benefit of the behind-the-scenes stuff. Here we are 18 years later now, a little over 18 years, and what's the number 1 story you always hear about Halloween Havoc? Not the pay-per-view page.
The pay-per-view.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you still hear about 18 years later. You don't hear about Goldberg and Page. You don't hear, you hear some about Hogan and Warrior, but that's maybe 15% from this pay-per-view. The large majority that you hear from it, possibly the remaining 85%, is the pay-per-view cutting out. That's all you ever hear about. So it makes it kind of difficult to rate this because of the fact that you have that huge backlash looming over it. And it makes it hard to rate this pay-per-view fairly. I tried to not let that get to me, and that's how I ended up at a 6. If I were to have let that background story get to me, I probably would have given this a 5, considering the fact that if you do it from the point of view of the people that lost the pay-per-view feed, you don't get Goldberg and Page, and you're stuck with the finish of Hogan and Warrior. And that right there, just thinking of that, puts this into, for me, a sub-5 category, a 4.5 possibly, if you look at it from that point of view. Luckily, you have Goldberg and Page, and that bumps it back above 5, because to me, the match is that good of a main event. Thank you, Page. Back to a 6. So, that does it for a show that we've hyped up for quite a few weeks, and our last look for the time being at Goldberg. So, as Harry mentioned earlier, I am not here next week. This might be my final show if Tessa Blanchard has anything to say about it. Oh, boy. But yes, next week I will be at... What?
Get him, Tessa.
Bite me. Next week, I will be at Rise on Thursday night and then Shimmer Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and 6 shows in 4 days. Harry will have a special guest to be determined, show covered to be determined, 2 weeks from tonight will be Survivor Series, and should we just go and call our final November show official?
Yeah, let's go ahead and make it official here for November 27th, because it's something that we've been kind of teasing for a couple of weeks here. We officially got the go-ahead that we wanted to get for this show on Friday night, so we're going to go ahead and do it. And since this was your doing, I'm going to let you make the announcement.
Alrighty. So finally, on November 27th, our first show back that we'll both be here for, Fury and I will finally cover the debut show of the Wrestling Revolver. From Clive, Iowa, from this past June. It is Sami Callihan's new company, and I'll at least mention the fact that this was done at Harry's insistence. Although I was a little nervous, but I wasn't going to bring it up. But Harry did not want us to do this show until I talked to Sami to make sure that I got the go-ahead that we could be 100% unbiased, because, all right, I'll let in a little bit. I am somewhat friends with Jessica Havoc. Jessica Havoc obviously is dating Sami Callihan. I've become friends with Sami Callihan as well, thanks to him holding the AEW World Heavyweight Championship at the home fed that I know he's closest to. So we were a little bit afraid that I would let personal bias get to me, and rightfully so. But we were also afraid that because I was friends with all of them, that we would not be able to be honest and unbiased without them pretty much coming after me and wanting to kill me. I know Harry would enjoy that, but that was a legitimate problem that we had. Talked everything out, smoothed everything over, so now the Sunday after Thanksgiving, Harry and I will finally cover the debut show of the Wrestling Revolver. Sami Callihan's brand new company with quite a few Attitude Era stars, including one of the big matches there, Sami Callihan on Hardcore Holly, which should be a mighty interesting one.
I feel the need to kind of touch on this topic as well, just due to the fact that you mentioned that I insisted that you talked to Sami about us doing the show here, because I didn't want to burn any bridges with Sami and you or get you any unnecessary heat from anybody in the business over there. But here's the deal for me. I have kind of always prided Wrestling Unwrapped and us doing this show, and this being our unfiltered thoughts on shows, due to the fact that, let's be honest here, you got a lot of heat for our review of AAW's Epic.
Boy, did I.
Because there were certain parts of that show that we were rather complimentary towards that AAW would prefer that fans not know that that show exists due to the guy whose involvement on that show. I won't mention his name. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know who I'm referring to. If you haven't, you can check our archives and you'll see the Epic review, and you'll know who I'm referring to once you listen to that. My thought process, though, is
smiling politely. Sorry.
Well, the world is a vampire. Anyways, my thought process here was due to the fact that this is the first ever sponsored show that we're going to be doing here on Wrestling Unwrapped. This show was given to us by management of Pro Wrestling Revolver to review for this very purpose. I want to make sure that it is known that I will not compromise my integrity on the review of this show due to the fact that we were given a free copy of the show to review. That was the reason that I had Patrick talk to Sami about this, because for those that don't know, as Patrick mentioned, Sami is the man behind Pro Wrestling Revolver. That I wanted him to know that while we were going to review the show, we were going to be unbiased looking at it there. We would review it just as we would review any other show here on Wrestling Unwrapped. But that's in 3 weeks. Again, Survivor Series in 14 days. I'll be back in 7 days with something. I don't know what yet. I don't know who, but something. Tonight's episode of Wrestling Unwrapped has been brought to you by the Madhouse Toy Chest. Stores.ebay.com/Madhouse Toy Chest. If you are a fan of anything pro wrestling, DVDs, action figures, magazines, posters, VHS tapes, yeah, he still has a couple VHS tapes. He actually has some old school wrestling video games too. I know he just put up a copy of SmackDown vs. Raw for PS2. So, you might want to jump on that if you're big into the SDVR games. Make sure you check out stores.ebay.com/Madhouse Toy Chest. If you mention that you heard this advertisement here on the show, you can get a free gift included with your order. Patrick, you can actually get the Highest Flyers DVD off him. I know he has a couple copies.
You must have missed earlier when I said I already had it.
Oh, I did miss that. Then we're doing Highest Flyers at some point.
We'll see.
All right. I'm done. Take us home, Ketchup.
And then, as always, we are a presentation of the W2M Network. For more information, including information about podcasts, their own top 25 college football rankings, plus their own info about different pop culture things, be sure to check out W2Mnet.com, and are brought to you in partnership with 411mania.com. Harry will see you next week. Both of us will see you, hopefully, in 2 weeks. Hopefully we're not dead by the length of Survivor Series. But until then, for Harry Broadhurst, for Sean Garmer, I'm Patrick Ketza. We'll see you next time. You have been listening to Wrestling Unwrapped as we talk about Halloween Havoc 1998 here on the W2M Network. Go, Cubs, go.